Greetings and aloha, everybody out there in Facebook world. Before we get started, I just want to say I have no idea what's going on with the lighting of my phone here. Very strange. I didn't do any kind of light enhancement or anything, so that's a little strange, but you know, deal with it, I guess. I don't know if I have to position this a little bit differently. It is what it is. But anyways, so moving right along here. So I was really inspired to just pull over on my way to the gym and talk about a topic that I think is absolutely critical. It's near and dear to me, and it's the fundamental issue in our entire society, of all health topics, in my opinion. Talking about the addicted brain phenomenon is something all of us have to get a handle on, and we all have to understand what has happened to us as human beings in a technological civilization, in an industrial civilization, and separated from nature. We have essentially become domesticated human beings, kind of like if you put a wild animal in a zoo and then you gave him coffee and you gave him cigarettes and you gave him donuts and you gave him processed food and genetically modified food, and you put him in these cages and you put him in an environment that mimicked their natural habitat, but it was more like an apartment, right? Like with ceilings, and they're basically put in a box with artificial lighting, artificial atmosphere with air, ventilators and ventilation, all that. And you basically put wild beings into a domesticated habitat, then you would basically end up with human beings. And so what that has turned, or domesticated animals that we call house pets, right? We have become a version of that. And that's what we need to understand first and foremost. We are not designed for the domesticated lifestyle, the domesticated environment or habitat or food patterns and behaviors or drug addictive patterns and behaviors and substances that we have all been influenced by, and we have been encouraged to take on into our daily life to suppress our anxiety, to suppress fear, to suppress doubt, to suppress personality disorders, to suppress all kinds of different things that our doctors and our psychiatrists and our trusted authorities have told us is something wrong with us. These things are not something wrong with us. Anxiety, doubt, fear, anxiousness, all these things are a feedback signal from the body, from our soul, telling us that something is out of balance to begin with. So we actually have to address, okay, well, what the heck is out of balance, right? What is actually out of balance within our situation? What is out of balance within me as a human being, right? It's not a pharmaceutical or a psychiatric drug, an SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, an antidepressant deficiency. I don't have a caffeine deficiency. I don't have a nicotine deficiency. I don't have an alcohol deficiency. I don't have a THC deficiency. That's right. I'm calling it out with cannabis as well, because this is abused to no end as well. I've been there for sure. Most people are. Most people have. These are not deficiencies. These are medication attempts. These are attempts to medicate an imbalance within the human being themselves, right? And that's okay. I'm not demonizing it. I'm just calling a spade a spade. We have to get to a place where we're calling out truth, and not masking it, right? The mask, what is this all about? It's not dealing with reality, right? It's not dealing with the fact that you have an immune system. You have an autoimmune system that is actually very intelligent and can be programmed and actually turned into an invincible immune system, which is something I've talked about for almost 10 years. Different subject, different topic for a different time. But you get the point, right? We have to call a spade a spade. Now, first of all, before I go deeper into this talk, I want to let you all know that I have a 5-week mentorship program that's coming out. It's called the Ultimate Dopamine Reset or Dopamine Reboot Program. It's a 5-week mentorship program. I'm taking a group of people through a 5-week dopamine transformation program that addresses the root cause of all addictions. It addresses the neurochemistry, the dopamine, the neurotransmitter, serotonin, all that kind of stuff, rebooting and resetting the neurotransmitter system, resetting your hormone system, and helping you break free of all biochemical and psychological addictions through resetting and rebooting the dopamine system. It is the most powerful program I've ever put together. It really feels like my life's work. And then, as a lot of you know, I'm getting ready to release my next book called The Addiction-Free Lifestyle: The True Path to Inner Freedom and Self-Mastery. Those things are all tied together. Everybody in this group as well that participates going to get a signed copy of the book when it comes out in about 2 months. So I just want to share that with you as well. I'll share a link in the comments that you can learn more about it, or send me a message if you're interested in the dopamine reset program. Would love to have you in it. Okay, so let's talk about the addicted brain phenomenon. What has happened to us essentially in this civilization, in this era, is that our brains have neuroplastically adapted, or you could say they have maladapted to the situation, circumstances, and programming of our society, right? So let's take something like coffee. People think, oh, coffee is just like, it's kind of an inert substance, caffeine, it's not that great for you, but kind of gets you up and going and stuff like that. People don't realize that when you rehearse and practice a behavior over and over and over, and you take in substances that stimulate certain neurochemicals, like your dopamine, for example, which is the pleasure reward kind of, and it's pleasure reward, and it's the chemical that's stimulated in anticipation for pleasure and reward, not actual pleasure. This is important to understand. Dopamine's not necessarily there for actual pleasure in the moment. That's serotonin. When you have a lot of serotonin, you are in a state of present moment. When you have a lot of dopamine flooding your brain, you're focusing on the future, and you're more like fantasy. It's like fantasizing, right? It's the fantasy fetish, kind of like pushing it off to the future, and you're not in the moment. You're in the future, and you're in that pleasure for the future kind of mode. But you're not in the moment. That's serotonin. Serotonin is the moment. Dopamine is the future. Where are most people's heads at? It's in the future, right? So, think of something like like caffeine and coffee in particular. Coffee stimulates certain responses in the brain, and what ends up happening is that, I could go into a deep kind of neuroscience conversation. I don't want to get too deep. I want to stay on topic here with the addicted brain. I just want to make an example. We can make a lot of examples, but your brain, it sets up a neurocircuitry or a neuroassociative pattern. What does that mean? That means when you do something and it stimulates a psycho-emotional response, your emotions are stimulated, your mental activity is stimulated, it creates a response pattern. So it basically creates a reference point in the brain where it's like, oh, I felt good. I felt better than I did before when I had the coffee yesterday. Let's do that again so I feel good again now, because I don't feel good without it. Okay? Now think about how dangerous that particular pattern can be. It sets up a reference point for, oh, I felt good when I did that, right? Therefore, I don't feel good without it. What's that? That's an addiction. That is an addiction starting to form in the circuitry of your brain. There's actually a book called The Addicted Brain. And you can imagine for my book that's coming out, The Addiction-Free Lifestyle, I mean, maybe you can't imagine how much research I do on average. And if you've read any of my past books, then you know I am a thorough researcher. I don't leave any stones untouched. And for this book, I went into everything that I've gone through over all the years, and specifically the addiction phenomenon. And I've sussed out everything on brain research when it comes to addiction. And I absolutely believe, without a shadow of a doubt, everybody let's say almost everyone, I don't know if everyone does, but let's say almost everyone has some form of an addicted brain formation. They have formed certain behavioral patterns that have created codependency in their brain circuitry. Their brain function is actually basically like how an addict functions, the personality of an addict. People say, oh, well, you know, I just have an addicted personality. Okay, well, let's look at that. What is a personality? People think, oh, the personality of Ronnie Landis is who Ronnie Landis is. No, a personality is an identity program. The personality is not me. Your personality is not you. You are an immortal soul. You are an unaddicted, free, liberated, immortal soul. That's what and who you are in this physical body. But you're living in a nervous system that has response patterns and stimuli and sensations that we call emotions and feelings, right? That's more the physical aspect of the human being. Who you are is not what you are. Who you are is an immortal soul. And there's no addictive tendency for an immortal soul. You can do something, not do it, doesn't matter. You don't need it. But when you deal with the hardware of the brain and the nervous system and how it's been patterned and how we have been literally habituated to be slaves to our impulses into the chemical dependency of substances and activities. Pornography is another one. I'm not going to get into that now, but I mean, geez, look at the whole generation of men. Look at the last 2 generations of men, especially the younger generation. I'm 35 years old, so my generation, look at men in their 40s to 50s. Wow, you want to talk about an addicted brain? You want to talk about a hijacking of the masculine brain in our society? I could riff on that for an hour or two, but just think about how incredibly detrimental that whole thing has been just for the men in our world. And then imagine what that does to women, right? It's obviously... that's a whole subject in of itself. I talk about that in depth. There's an entire chapter in my book, The Addiction-Free Lifestyle, on pornography. So it's about 12,000 words, I think. It's quite a bit. We talk about that. By the way, everything that I'm talking about right now, I go into in depth in my upcoming 5-week coaching program, the Ultimate Dopamine Reset Program. This is the most important thing that I've ever done. The website is www.hhphealth.com/dopamine, hhphealth.com/dopamine. I'm going to put that in the comments below when I'm done with this live. Make sure you check that out if you're interested in this. I take an entire group through this. There's a 21 video course that I built into this as well. A 21-day dopamine reset and reboot protocol that I take everybody through, including myself. Really powerful program, so highly recommend you check that out. So let's get back onto the topic here. So you can kind of theorize and ascertain the effects of our society and how we've been trained to this idea of the addicted brain, right? Again, the key is understanding that you are not you don't have an addictive personality. That is a program. A personality in of itself is a program. It's an identity program, and you can change. I'm just trying to move my camera here. You can change the program. You can always change the program, right? And that's the key here. You can go from addiction to liberation. You can change your neurochemistry. You can change the neuroassociative responses that you have to certain patterns, behaviors, and substances. And you can change the relationship that you have to these things, but you have to go through a reset process. There's no moderation for most of these things, and we have to understand that. A lot of people are trying to moderate, and for example, like, oh, I'm going to do a little bit less of that thing. I'm going to do a little bit less every day and just slowly wean myself off. That tends not to work so well because you have to reset the entire system. And so you have to have a transition phase where you actually go cold turkey, but you have certain things in the form of supplements, superfoods, hydration, certain organic foods, like changing your diet in a way that alkalizes your body, helps you detox, infrared saunas, different things like that. There's a lot of other things that we could talk about that help your body and your nervous system and your brain adapt to being self-dependent instead of codependent on substances like caffeine or nicotine or the stimuli that you get from the dopamine stimulation, the hypernormal stimulation that you get from pornography, in these false flow states, and getting into what we know as a real flow state, because that's what this is all about. It's about getting into the flow, getting into the hyper flow of hypersynchronicity, and being able to tap into those flow states that come when your brain is synchronized, when the right and left hemispheres of the brain are synchronized. And the addiction phenomenon is basically trying to mimic the flow state, right? It mimics the flow state. But that's the trick of the addicted brain. The addicted brain will tell you all kinds of stories, and it will trick you into getting what it wants, which is the pleasure reward sensation. So you have to retrain your brain to get pleasure from things that don't drive immediate gratification, basically, right? There's a lot of examples that we can make. And again, I go through this in my program. This is a huge theme in this upcoming book that I'm working on, in all the coaching work that I'm doing, especially with men in particular, because our entire generation of masculinity has been hijacked to get men to get hopped up on pleasure, and basically deplete themselves, whether it's through masturbation, it's through, hyperstimulation, it's through being all comfy and cozy with our emotions. It's like the masculinity has basically been inverted, right? Through addiction phenomenons and through the addicted brain. And so we've lost, as a generation, we've lost that strong, solid, grounded masculinity. And women are suffering because of it. Men are suffering. People don't realize how much men are suffering. I've been through it. I know this topic inside and out because I'm a man who has experienced it. I've gone full circle through this, and I've learned a few things, and I've pulled myself out of it as well, which is why I am now doing this work. And I'm launching this 5-week mentorship program, the Dopamine Reset program, and taking people through this so we can actually, we can pull ourselves out of codependency and bring ourselves into sovereignty. And that starts by understanding the addicted brain phenomenon, understanding that our brain has something called neuroplasticity. And that neuroplasticity, basically, our brain forms itself to the patterns, the behaviors, and the habits that we rehearse over and over. And the stimulation, the neurochemical stimulation that our brain receives when we do certain things, right? Again, we can make the example of caffeine, coffee, tea, tobacco, cannabis, other substances, psychoactive substances, although they don't tend to have, like entheogens, plant medicines, don't tend to have the same addictive quality. People do, but people can develop an addictive relationship with escapism, escaping the normality of their reality by jumping into these peak states of experience that can happen through magic mushrooms or MDMA or different medicinal, psychological medicinal plants. But they can use it in a way that's actually addictive, right? And it sets up this false reference point in the brain for a peak experience, because ultimately that person has an addicted brain and they can't deal with the normal ups and downs of normal life, right? The boredom. People are escaping boredom. They can't deal with themselves. So they have to trigger that dopamine anticipation for the future response. And they're actually burning out their dopamine receptors. And so when they wake up in the morning, it's no wonder people are just dazed and confused. People are just lethargic. They wake up and they're like, oh my God, it's another day. Jeez. What am I going to do? Oh, where's the coffee? Where, how do I stimulate myself into feeling better? If you have that going on, then there's an addicted brain. Your brain is addicted on on hyperstimuli. And that's a problem because we're only going to be digging ditches further and further into the ground until we finally look ourselves in the mirror and say, you know what? I have driven an addictive behavior. I have used certain substances or behaviors or habits that have actually been detrimental. I did it because I wanted to medicate this feeling of discomfort or tension or this anxiety pattern, the stress pattern, whatever is living inside of me. Okay, that's great. We all do it. That's how we've been trained in this society. No shame. There's no shame. Shame and guilt is what glues the addictive behavior together. And that's what creates the escapism, right? We have to call a spade, look ourselves in the mirror, deal with reality, and then have the courage to say, I am making a change now. I am going to reroute the addicted brain that I have developed because neuroplasticity is what it is. We can develop an addicted brain, but we can also develop an unaddicted brain. We can develop a sovereign brain, right? And there's a lot of ways we do that through brain state training, through right precursor supplementation, precursor for neurotransmitter supplementation, organic foods, superfoods, herbs, detoxification and cleansing the glymphatic system of the brain, the brain's lymphatic system. It's called the glymphatic system, and rebuilding the neurocircuitry patterns in the brain so we develop healthy neuroassociations instead of negative, detrimental, addiction-based neuroassociative patterns, which is basically what most people do. It's what most people do. I did it. I was just conscious of it. So I knew that I could reroute myself. And I'm going through the dopamine detox process right now. And I can tell you, more powerful than anything I've ever done, anything out there, is the dopamine reset process. It's the ultimate cleanse for your brain, right? And social media is a big part of this too. I mean, what an ironic thing, because we are communicating through this social media interface, and I'm using it to communicate this message to you. And I'm also here to say social media is one of the biggest drivers for artificial dopamine stimulation and causes us to eject from the present moment. Remember, serotonin is present moment, contentment, true pleasure, right? Not this hyper-stimulated, extravagant type of pleasure, which is always in the future. It's always in the future. It's fantasy, 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 escapism. It's never in the present moment. The real pleasure sensation comes from fulfillment, right? It comes from the result of hard work. It comes from the result of actually pursuing something that causes us to grow and transform and overcome some limitation within us. The hyper dopamine stimulation is always about fantasy. It's always about what's easy. It's always about like cutting corners, bypassing, fantasizing, projecting off into some kind of fantastical, maybe some spiritual rainbow land or something. I don't know. Something that has nothing to do with reality. But dealing with reality, dealing and overcoming with real challenges in our life is actually what creates the real pleasure. It's fulfillment. And that's how you rebuild and repair the neurotransmitter receptor sites that have been worn out and broken down because of all the excessive false stimulation of our society. Again, I've said it in the beginning of this talk, I'll say it again. We have become domesticated like some kind of farm animal, free range, or for some case, genetically modified farm animal, that we have become domesticated from our wild roots, our wild genetics, our wild genomic, genetic, epigenetic information that's still encoded inside of us, our epigenetic ancestral information about who we were on this planet, connected to nature, not disconnected in some artificial mimicking environment used to mimic nature like a zoo. We basically have been put in some free-range zoo. And we have to get back to who and what we really are. And that comes from activating our DNA, activating our genetics, and getting off the dopaminergic addiction cycle that we have all been encouraged and trained within a society that is based in and around creating addictive consumers. That's what our society is. That's what organized society is. That's what organized religion is. That's what all of it is. It's basically addict development. Create addiction, codependency, and a middleman to divinity. And now, hey, we got him. We got him. Turn people into consumers instead of creators. So what I'm talking about is overriding and reverting that inverted program and connecting back with our creator consciousness and rebooting our dopamine receptors. Because once you do that, you will have all the motivation and willpower in the world. You won't need something outside of yourself. You won't need a substance. If you want coffee, you can enjoy it for the moment, but you don't need that to get up and go. You don't need that to motivate yourself. You don't need that to wake up in the morning. You are awake before you even open your eyes. You're dreaming while awake. You're dreaming while asleep. You are recovering, and your sleep quality, by the way, will get better and better and better. If you're not able to sleep and your sleep quality is not that great, it's partly because you have an addicted brain. I'll say it. And again, there's no shame, no guilt, no fear. I'm just talking about a neurophysiological phenomenon that is occurring for all of us based in and around an addiction-based society. There's no shame around this. Let go of the shame. Let go of the guilt. It's all about self-love. And if you love yourself, if we love ourselves, truly love ourselves, then we can delay immediate gratification. We can delay immediate stimulation, and we can do the inner work and actually change the program and pattern because we love ourselves enough to choose our future over the immediate pleasure of the moment, which doesn't usually actually create pleasure. Overcoming our limitations is what creates true pleasure, and it takes courage to do that. So that's what I'm encouraging you to do. That's what I'm speaking about in this video, talking about the addicted brain phenomenon. And if we're going to make any change in our lives, in the world, we're going to make any change here, we got to retrain this thing. This computer, this hyper intelligent computing device, this mega processor called the brain. We got to override those addiction patterns because nothing's going to change if we don't. I'm telling you, I know this so well. I've worked with thousands of people, and I'm doing this work now exclusively in the realm of addiction. And I just want to share with you one more time before I cut off this upcoming 5-week coaching program that I'm leading. It's a group coaching program, the Ultimate Dopamine Reset Program. It has a 21-video, 21-day protocol course built into it. And I'm taking a group through a 5-week mentorship program where I'm doing live coaching calls every single week. We have a private community. Everybody in the program is going to get a signed copy of my upcoming book, The Addiction-Free Lifestyle, which should release in around 2 months. This program starts mid-November. So in about 2.5 weeks, this program is going to launch. I really want you to take a look at this. The website is hhphealth.com/dopamine. I'm going to put that in the comments below here so you can check it out. hhphealth.com/dopamine. This is the most important work that I've ever done in the world, and it's a culmination of the last 10 years of all the work that I've done in the holistic health and nutrition and transformation world. I'm bringing all those tools together, simplifying it for a program that I think has the most transformational value of anything I've ever done. Again, this is the 5-week coaching program, the Ultimate Dopamine Reset Protocol, or program, with a 21-day reset protocol built into it. The link is going to be in the comments in a moment here. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Reach out to me, send me a message if you're interested or this really touched you and you're like, wow, holy shit, like, dude, he is so on point. Like, this is the thing in our world. This is the thing that I'm struggling with. This is the thing that my family is struggling with. My friends are struggling with. My contemporaries and colleagues are struggling with. My child is struggling with. If you have children in their teens and they're already developing these neuroassociative patterns, their brain is like a sponge. I'm telling you, this is why children can learn 5 languages by the time they're 5 or 6. But they've been programmed with all these false addiction inputs, these codependent inputs, these wounded trauma-based inputs. And by the time they're like 13 years old, they have developed this addiction personality and this kind of entitled victimhood personality. We got to overwrite that. And it just so happens I know how to do that, right? And you can know how to do that. And that's what I want to share with you. So that's it for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, this 5-week coaching program, the ultimate reset, a dopamine reset program with the 21-day dopamine reboot protocol. Send me a message. I'd love to chat with you. I'd love to have a conversation. And the link for the program is going to be in the comments below. Much love and aloha. Blessings to everyone out there. I look forward to connecting with you, and I'm going to be sharing a lot more information every day on these topics because I am so passionate about this. And if we're going to make any change in the world, let alone in our personal lives, we got to overcome the addicted brain because it's tricking us. It keeps tricking us back into the old patterns and behaviors using false pleasure as a mode of tricking us to get us to do the same thing. We got to override those programs. And if we can't do it, if we choose not to do it, then I don't know what's going to happen in our world. But I know for me, I made the commitment. I hope you'll make the commitment and we can help each other along the way. Much love, blessings, aloha. Talk to you all soon.